In the meantime, the ICC has vowed to continue its judicial work despite US sanctions. Professor of International Law at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Hennie Strydom, joins us now for a bit of analysis. Professor Strydom, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Where does this leave the ICC? What does this mean, actually? Does it cull their work? Does it limit their scope?
Yeah, we must remember this is not the first time it has happened. There was a previous similar action being taken against staff of the ICC. And it hasn't prevented the court from fulfilling its duties under the Rome Statute. So, but it may have an impact. This current round of sanctions are aimed at not only at travel bans, but also could have economic implications where assets being held by American assets being held by staff may be targeted by the sanctions. And the other worrisome thing is, and we do not know whether that will in fact happen, when United States withdraws its funding and will impact on the work of the court. So, but at the moment, we do not know what the impact will be. We will see how seriously that will be implemented and enforced against staff. But I think the thing to take home is that it's irresponsible of a country like the United States of America to undermine the work of the court in this way. And what makes it worse is that it has tried before. Now, that stands in contrast with the willingness of the United States to use its powers in the Security Council to refer cases to the ICC, as in the case with the al-Bashir warrant of arrest. So once it goes via that route, and it's not one of its allies that's targeted, the US seem to be quite happy to cooperate with the court.
Yeah, I want to perhaps to take a step back here a little bit, if we can. The significance of the ICC in global politics, in the state of the world as it currently stands, when protectionism is so rife as well, when you have leaders like Vladimir Putin, who was then given an arrest warrant by the ICC, still no compliance with regards to that. Netanyahu, ultimately the same thing from Israel. Does it still have the same teeth? Is it still fit for purpose?
It is fit for purpose, certainly, because we need an institution like that as long as states, the member states and other states are reluctant to prosecute those responsible for serious international law crimes. And that's why we have the court in the first instance. It's because of the failure of states to prosecute under the domestic law. So it's a safety net. And it's a safety net for the victims of the crimes. That is the important thing to remember. But you're quite right. The point that you're making is very relevant. It deals with the enforceability of the decisions taken by the court. And when we talk about that, we have to move our focus to the member states, because the arrests can only take place if they cooperate in that regard with the court. When they fail to do it, then the court's hands are tied. So the member states of the court have a very serious responsibility under the Rome Statute to make things work and to make things work better.
Yeah, one wonders, I mean, you've got, what is it, at least 30 fugitives of the International Criminal Court since July 2005. So that begins to be the key worry in this case, that even if they put in these sanctions, does the work of the ICC actually stop at all? Can the ICC actually enforce anything? Because ultimately they can't just attempt to come into anybody's country and proactively put in or put forward the summons or the jail term ultimately that they're looking for, the arrest warrant. So how does a country then, how do other countries react to something like this? What should the rest of the world be doing, whether it be the European Union, whether it be some of the other countries, whether it be in South America and the West and the like? Does this make the ICC perhaps something that they don't follow anymore?
It makes the ICC very vulnerable because if states in any number refuse or, become indifferent to requests for the enforcement of warrants of arrest, it will eventually undermine the effectiveness of the court, because those that should be brought to justice will not be brought to justice. The only positive development concerning the latest round of US measures, sanctions, are the responses by several states critical of the US stance in this regard. Also from the European Union side, and Germany came out very strongly. So Hungary joined the US in its stance for the simple reason that it is a big friend of Putin, and Putin is also facing a warrant of arrest. So states seem to be divided at this point in time, but from the information that we have now, the majority of states who responded are critical of the United States move in this regard.
Yeah, how should the rest of the world be dealing with the United States, though? Because now you look at it and you just think, is protectionism ultimately the state of the game right now? And the rest of the world is ultimately focusing on themselves, meaning that they don't follow what was international law, the laws that the likes then of Bill Clinton try to get the rest of the world to be a part of. Is globalization in this form, in terms of appealing and accepting international law, is that dying?
It's not dying. It is undermined. It is still there, but it's undermined by leaders such as Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. And we will always have them. They will always be with us, unfortunately. So when they are in a very powerful position, it's very difficult to bring them to their senses through diplomacy and so on. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is the sanctions that the US now wants to impose on staff of the ICC. We have to ask her what will be the effect of that. It will only affect staff who want to travel to the United States, maybe to visit families or whatever, and maybe on official visits. But I mean, there are many other countries they can travel to, and from where they may get assistance. The only issue is where those staff members in their individual capacity hold US assets, then they might be under threat from a financial point of view. But I mean, even if that's the case, the effect, I think, is too limited to really make the ICC ineffective. It may hamper the successes and it may hamper the speed with which it can work, but it's too small, the impact, to bring it to a standstill.
So how do we strengthen international law, especially the enforcement of international law?
We can only strengthen it if there are sufficient numbers of countries enforcing it in their domestic law. We must not forget that among the 123 members of the ICC, they have laws in place to start prosecutions themselves. So if the fugitives travel to countries with that laws in place and having given their courts jurisdiction to start prosecutions, these fugitives may still be prosecuted under international law and domestic law in individual states. And many of those cases are still ongoing at this point in time, from other conflicts apart from Gaza. In Syria, for instance, the atrocities committed there. So there are states making sure that they have things in place and they are making efforts to apprehend those fugitives. So that part of the justice project in many states is still ongoing. And I think it's a good thing that it is happening, because as long as we have lack of cooperation with the ICC, it is very important that individual states do prosecute at the domestic level.
Yeah, ultimately, we should not be keeping quiet despite them not adhering to the ICC's rules, regulations, the international law as it's been put forward. Professor, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Professor of International Law at the University of Johannesburg, Hennie Strydom, joining us for that analysis.